Mr. Speaker, on January 11th, all across Ontario and from coast to coast to coast, Canadians will remember the incredible legacy of our first Prime Minister, Sir John A. MacDonald. Born 150 years ago on that day in Scotland, MacDonald's family arrived in Canada when he was just 5 years old, and Canada would never be the same. We gather today to celebrate the bicentennial of the birth of a truly exceptional man. They say to understand where we came from, the roots of Canadian history and its politics, we must understand the life, career and accomplishments of John A. MacDonald. It's not an easy task. MacDonald's character and achievements continue to fascinate historians, students and all Canadians who enrich themselves by exploring the life and legacy of one of Canada's proud founding fathers. In his day, he had no political equal. He was an experienced statesman, lawyer, dedicated husband and father, and a far more colourful character than many would assume. He was also a natural and eloquent speaker and pragmatic coalition builder, drawing people to his side through his words and speeches, both inside Parliament and out. Sir John A. MacDonald always believed in the incredible potential of our great country. Throughout the 1860s, he was a tireless advocate for the Confederation movement and even drafted the British North American Act, under which the 4 provinces were united on July 1, 1867. One of the many colourful stories that I think speaks to the fascination we have for Sir John A.'s personality took place in December 1866, when he was in London to work out the final details of the BNA Act. He somehow set his hotel room on fire and burned his shoulder during the accident. MacDonald prudently kept the incident quiet and soldiered on. I suspect he could hardly resist from sharing the story immediately because, by all accounts, he had a wicked sense of humour and would disarm people with his quick wit. He once stopped outside a cathedral during the 1878 election, where his local political opponent asked him if he was there to pray for success. John A. smiled and said, "There's a difference between our parties. We pray for the people, and you pray on the people." Somewhat applicable today, Mr. Speaker. I won't say who's doing what, though. We've all heard the story of him dismissing another political opponent who called him a drunk after he vomited during an election debate. MacDonald collected himself, and he said he got sick not because of drink, but because he was forced to listen to the rantings of his honourable opponent. Mr. Speaker, modern election debates just don't deliver such headlines anymore. They should. MacDonald, despite his tremendous political success, was aware of his foibles and didn't take himself too seriously. As Prime Minister, he prefaced a meeting with the president of the Women's Christian Temperance League by saying he was troubled to start a meeting when he could clearly smell water on someone's breath. Yes, Sir John A. MacDonald was not perfect, Mr. Speaker. He was known to overindulge in strong drink from time to time, even during debates in the House of Commons. But he was forgiven because he could set aside his own faults and his own partisan biases for a broader cause and more compelling, noble purpose. In his own words, "My sins of omission and commission I do not deny, but I trust that it may be said of me in the ultimate issue, much is forgiven because he loved much, for I have loved my country with a passionate love." As our country's first Prime Minister and one of the longest-serving Prime Ministers in Canadian history, he was the driving force behind the birth of our nation, as well as the common values that kept the new Dominion together during those fledgling early years, and saw it expand from sea to sea. John A. MacDonald was Prime Minister when the first spike of the Canadian Pacific Railway was driven into the ground. He was our nation's leader at the dawn of hydroelectric power that would later fuel the 20th century economy. Stitching together our country from west to east with the transcontinental railway must have seemed a bold and audacious dream at the time. But MacDonald saw it become a reality through his tenacity. That same tenacity, combined with charm and diplomacy, kept our young country strong in the face of dangerous political turbulence. Even after winning the Maritimes' approval of Confederation at the Charlottetown Conference, primarily through his diplomacy with the premiers of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, Canada was still fragile. Nova Scotia voters largely rejected the pact, while the ink was barely dry, by electing a large contingent of anti-Confederate politicians. MacDonald tactfully brought anti-Confederate leader Joseph Howe into his cabinet and used his influence to get Nova Scotians on side. Even more astute was Sir John A. Macdonald's political maneuvering at the Washington Conference, where Britain and the United States were negotiating Civil War grievances. The British government only wanted him there in case it had to give Canada over to the U.S. to reach a settlement. By the end of the conference, however, Canadian affairs accounted for half the agenda, and Canada, a colony of Britain at the time, won the remarkable right to grant or withhold approval of the British-U.S. Pact. Even the most successful politician would have called that a great achievement and walked away immensely pleased. Sir John A. Macdonald, however, wanted the icing on his cake. He also walked away with Britain's agreement to loan a very large amount of money to Canada for his Trans-Canada Railway. John A. Macdonald was a true visionary. We all know his history as the father of Confederation, the father of national policy, father of the Uniting Railroad, and father of Canadian conservatism. But he was also ahead of his time in matters we take for granted now in Canada. John A. Macdonald was the first Democratic leader in the world to publicly argue for women's right to vote. It might also surprise some critics of his decision to allow the execution of Louis Riel that Macdonald held a strong belief that Canada's Aboriginal people, whom he called the original owners of the land, should also have the fundamental right to vote. His message and his vision were always hopeful. Macdonald's once described the legacy he hoped to leave: "If I had influence over the minds of the people of Canada, any power over their intellect, I would leave them with this legacy. Whatever you do, adhere to the Union. We are a great country and shall become one of the greatest in the universe if we preserve it." John A. Macdonald reached out and united a land with diverse interests, backgrounds, and creeds. He did it with character, he did it with personality, he did it with leadership. And for that, we celebrate the bicentennial of Sir John A.'s birth. And, Mr. Speaker, with that, I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays, and happy birthday to Sir John. You've done so much for our beautiful country.